Okay, sorry for this very ambitious title, creating the first Divina, the future of digital comics. I know it may sound a bit pretentious, but really the idea is to give you a sense of what we want the future of digital comics to look like, and so what it may eventually look like once we have created all the different items that Laurent has just spoken about. And we are going to present you a pilot project that we have creating the first Divina, showing you, insisting on the process that we followed, the problems we faced, and the choices that we had to make. Just please keep in mind that this is all a work in progress, and so some aspects are still very controversial, even between us. We need to take decisions, and it's going to take some time. So first, I wanted to start with a quote from someone who does not exist. So it's Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones. No spoilers ahead, don't worry. Even if in any case there's nothing to spoil anymore now, so it's finished. So it's a quote taken from the last episode that was broadcast just a month ago, and it became an instant inspirational quote for all storytellers, from digital marketers to hopefully artists and authors. What unites people? Armies, gold, flags? No, stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. And why it feels important to me to remind you of that is that there's a topic we haven't talked that much about for the past few hours and half days. It's just who is behind the stories that we create and who is behind the content initially. What are we doing all that for? All these publishing initiatives, they all revolve around the idea that at some point, somebody has something to share. It can be information, a story, emotions, pictures of cute cats, but there's people wanting to share things, and the question we are asking ourselves is, who are these people, what do they have to say, and what makes something compelling, and why would we want those people who have more tools to tell the stories that they want to tell? So this is the mission that I decided to give myself when I created Qualia 2 years ago. It's a company that develops tools and services for authors, especially visual storytellers, who wants to use digital to add elements that could not be printed on media. Really, the idea is to have new kinds of comics, natively digital comics, and the criterion for that is you cannot print them on paper without losing some user experience. For example, you can see this example on my website. It's an adaptation of one of the first Lumiere brother movies, and you see a train coming out of the screen because, you know, in the urban legend, people were so afraid of seeing that movie and seeing the train coming out of the train that they just ran out of the room. Here, the idea is to play with time animations and in-scroll animations and parallax effects to mimic this idea that the train is coming out of the screen, and it's coming out of the screen so much that it even comes out of the panel itself. So this is our story. We decided to embark on that journey. Of course, on that journey, we need allies. We found them in the form of Laurent and others, representatives of distribution platforms, editors, even the BNF here. We all agreed on the fact that there was a disconnect between what could be and what was in the field of digital comics. There's many effects that we could give as possibilities to authors, and we don't do that. So how can we tap into that? And that's how we came with the idea of the Divina format, which has very clear objectives. First, editorial control. Allow authors and editors to really have control over the way the story is rendered to the final reader or user or consumer, however you want to call him or her. Second, cost reduction that you can have through industrialization, which involves using tools. From the moment you have authoring tools, of course, you can industrialize production much more. And also one very important point was durability. How do you ensure that stories that are created now can still be read in 10 to 20 years? And the way we decided to tackle all those challenges was by creating a new profile for web publications called Divina. And that has one big advantage. It's a declarative format, so it does not depend on a specific language or framework. And because of all those elements, it can also open the doors to more options like multilingual publications, digital library loans. Really, the idea behind all that is seeing a new market emerge, creating a whole ecosystem for digital comics, and agreeing on a standard is the first step for that, because as you know, it allows for a decoupling between production and distribution, and that really opens the doors to many actors at different parts of the value chain. So this is how we created the BD Comics Manga Working Group at EDRLab. And this is the process we decided to follow. First, study all the works over the past 15 to 20 years that have been labeled as digital comics. In them, try to find commonalities. What are the use cases? What are the features that we see coming again and again? Out of those, try to define families and define functional concepts. That's the part where you have to be smart. Try to find ways to describe things that look very different as technical or more than functional concepts that are actually the same. In-scroll animations and time animations are just animations, something moving because something is changing. How can you find a way to generalize that and factor that? That leads to the Divina specifications that we are currently working on, and as I said earlier, there's still some work to do. And there's some work to do because we also quickly realized that something was missing. Just like in the previous presentation, we lacked an example, we lacked feedback. And so quite quickly we came to the idea that we needed a first pilot project, a first example. We are different actors, all of them have different goals in doing so. Clearly I want to build an authoring tool with creator feedback to ensure that it will be used. Laurent at EDRLab wanted to be able to showcase the work of the working group. And as for Pika Edition, the publisher that we managed to bring in the loop, they have their own objectives, and I will let Yoann Lescoul, the author, tell you more about that.
Merci. Alors, n'hésitez pas à mettre vos appareils de traduction. Moi, je vais parler en français. Yoann Lescoul, du coup, moi, je suis auteur du coup avec le groupe créatif de Pika Édition H2T. Donc ça fait quelques années qu'on travaillait sur des projets de bande dessinée, mais pas que. On avait des réflexions qui évoluaient autour de plusieurs sujets transmédia, on va dire, parce que j'ai aussi un peu une expérience sur le montage vidéo ou même le game making. Donc dans l'idée, c'était qu'on voulait déjà de base avoir un projet qui aille un peu plus loin que la simple bande dessinée. Donc, quand Florian, Laurent, tout le monde s'est réuni avec Pika pour pouvoir parler un peu d'un projet prototype, du coup, ils m'ont approché aussi pour simplement que je puisse à la fois raconter une histoire, mais aussi utiliser un outil qui nécessitait un petit peu de compréhension de systèmes digitaux qui étaient encore en train de maturer. Voilà pour l'introduction. Okay. Cool. Je te remercie.
Thank you. So the interesting part was that, as Laurent said, working on a first example actually means working on 4 different items at the same time. First, what we want to see published is a creation, a work of art, a publication. So this was the job of Yoann and Ludivine, who is here, as the editor. Second, we need the specifications for the Divina format, the file that will be created in the end. That is the work of the BD working group. Then we need a reading engine to ensure that people on their mobile phones will be able to read those comics. So ideally, we also need a test app, something that will demonstrate the power of the format. And then ideally, so that everything is easier and faster, we need an authoring tool, especially to link the ideas of the author and the possibilities we want to give him or her to the actual format itself. And beyond that, because it's 4 different items, it also means that it's a whole variety of point of view that you have to consider, and that sometimes may be quite tough to reconcile, because there's a storytelling aspect, narration aspect to it. There's art, visual art. How do you combine art with that? There's technology, you all know that. Plus, another element we haven't talked that much about is UX and UI design. How do you get that into the authoring tools and the reading engine to ensure that the experience is really smooth for the final user? We'll get to that later on. So here is more or less the process we had working on that pilot project. So it's a whole back and forth between tech and art. And I see all you taking pictures. It's clearly very beautifully designed, right? I don't understand why Laurent didn't even ask me to draw the whole comic myself, seeing how beautiful this whole chart is. So we started in December with a first meeting that was used to just set the objectives. A second meeting a month after that was trying to list all the possibilities. And Yoann was so fast, he had already drawn the whole storyboard, but he will tell you about that later on. And from that point, we noticed that we needed a shared vocabulary. It's something that was missing. We were not talking about the same topics. It wasn't clear. We decided to do that and at the same time take some strong decisions. Whenever you embark on a journey like that, on a creative project, you have to take a small number of very strong decisions at the beginning that we will not change. And one example here was the idea that the comic will be tappable. We won't allow scrolling. Changing from page to page and even like moving within a page, we have to be done with the same gesture so that the user doesn't have to learn something new in the process. And for the part that deals with the continuous improvements and how the story itself was created, I will let Yoann tell you more about that.
Alors merci du coup, à nouveau la petite appareil. Donc voilà, donc moi je vais un peu vous expliquer le processus créatif tel que j'ai pu, à travers le spectre de la création, du coup le processus qu'on a pu avoir effectivement. Donc pour commencer, évidemment, il fallait une histoire. Donc ce qui s'est passé, c'est qu'il a fallu du coup designer un storyboard, comme chacun peut se douter. Dans l'idée, c'est qu'il a fallu pouvoir aussi vite comprendre que le cadre simplement de la page n'était pas valide ici. Il fallait mieux du coup penser en termes d'écran et en termes d'écran navigable. Donc il a fallu commencer à avoir un cadre, on va dire, de réflexion qui soit assez souple. Et donc avant même qu'on ait effectivement cette réunion sur le langage, lors de l'élaboration du storyboard, il a fallu pouvoir mettre en place comment on allait passer d'une case envers une autre, d'une page envers une autre. Donc il y avait cette idée effectivement déjà d'avoir le matériau de script de base. Ensuite, une fois qu'on avait ce document, il a fallu pouvoir avoir un document de traduction. Parce que simplement entre le développeur, l'artiste, les éditeurs et les différents acteurs qui pouvaient avoir intérêt à ce que ce format se développe, on ne parlait pas la même langue. Donc il y a à la fois des transitions dans le web, des transitions dans le film, on va dire, il y a des mots particuliers dans chacun de ces domaines. Et des fois, on s'apercevait qu'un cut, qu'un travelling, qu'un panning n'avait pas forcément les mêmes incidences, notamment sur le développement de l'outil. Donc il fallait qu'à la fois, pour moi le concevoir, on ait certains mots, et que même après, derrière, donc ça ce sera du coup des choses encore en chantier, pour la navigation du lecteur ou simplement du spectateur, il y ait des choses qui soient assez intuitives, pas des choses complètement folles à l'écran, quoi. Ensuite, donc, une fois qu'on était d'accord sur cette langue qu'on allait parler ensemble, il a fallu du coup pouvoir simplement planifier ces transitions, ces animations sur ces images. Donc il y a eu à la fois le processus de création, bien évidemment, visuel que vous voyez ici, et aussi simplement se dire que maintenant qu'on commençait à avoir une bonne vision de ce qu'allait donner l'histoire, parmi cette liste de vocabulaire qu'on a mis en place, qu'est-ce qu'on allait choisir pour pouvoir exprimer au mieux cette chose. On n'est pas dans quelque chose de statique comme la bande dessinée, donc comment utiliser les effets, cet outil d'autoring pour pouvoir raconter cette histoire au mieux. Mais une fois après, on passe à la pratique. Donc voilà un petit peu un exemple de l'outil d'autoring encore en work in progress. Du coup, on peut voir effectivement que on a une table de montage, somme toute assez facile à distinguer, avec des outils déjà qui nous permettent d'avoir des transitions entre les images, entre les pages, un outil de preview qui nous permet de comprendre assez rapidement, donc du coup, ce que j'ai prévu comme effet, est-ce que ça marche? Est-ce que ça ne marche pas? Est-ce qu'il faut que je recommence? Voilà, j'ai facilement la main entre la prévisualisation et l'outil de composition pour pouvoir, en fait, de façon très organique, concevoir et corriger mon histoire. Donc voilà un peu comment le processus créatif s'est développé au fur et à mesure des sessions qu'on a pu avoir ensemble avec les différents acteurs de ce projet. Voilà.
Thank you. So what did we learn during that journey? A few lessons here that we'll remember. They all start with a quote. So first quote, I think it's a quote that everybody in the working group at some point, it's a question that everybody asks at some point, but what is a page? We're always talking about pages, and it took us a lot of time to understand we were not talking about the same things. What is a page? Is it an HTML page? But we don't want HTML in our language because it's declarative, so there's no HTML per se. So is it a paper page? But precisely, we want to get out of the paper. So what point does it have to talk in terms of paper? Maybe it's just screens. Is it a panel? No, because we want to have several panels in a screen. Oh, so maybe screen is right. Well, not exactly, because when it's scrollable, it's not a screen anymore. It's more like a long window, a UI view, however you want to call it. So we quickly understood that not being able to speak the same language would be a problem and would make us lose a lot of time. So we had to define a whole vocabulary. And this is my recommendation in this case. Yes, define a shared vocabulary and allow yourself to add words in the equation, concepts, that will make things easier for everyone, even if they don't necessarily correspond to what everybody would think about. For example, we talked a lot about camera because allowing a user to scroll in a page is more or less like moving a camera over a scene, like doing a pan movement. And really thinking in terms of camera in scenes, for example, helps clarify things and understand better what you are manipulating. And so in this sense, what you are manipulating may not look like a book anymore, to be fair. Second lesson, the poetic way of saying it is the enemy of art is the absence of limitations. And then the more Henry Ford way of saying things when they launched the famous T model was any customer can have a color, can have a car any color that he wants as long as it is black. The idea here is you don't allow your author to do everybody he or she wants to do. You have to set limitations, and really art and creativity will come from the limitations that you set. So you have to start with why, like in the famous Simon Sinek presentation. But you have to start with why and continue with why and finish with why and basically just ask why all the time. Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to have this kind of transition? Does it really help? And so you have to start thinking like a producer, like a movie producer, like how much would it cost me to do that, to develop that for you? How will you use it? Does it really add something to the story? Do you really want Tom Cruise to jump out of a plane and land on the Eiffel Tower on rollerblades? No, do that in CGI. Do that with a monkey. Put a face in CGI on the monkey and do that like this. It's cheaper, it's more effective, and it's just less tensions for everyone. And the second thing, the second key word here is no. Oh, I want to be able to do that. No, we won't allow you to do that. The good part here is we didn't have to do it that much because one thing that helps is when you work with an author that really understands your constraints and your tools. And because Yoann is so good with tools and he does editing, he does Unity games, it's really easier to talk with someone like that who understands the constraints of everyone in the chain. And so everybody stays in their role, and it makes things easier for everyone. Third key element, they may forget what you said or did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Okay, this is a tricky part, because at this point, to be fair, we really lack perspective on what we are doing. We don't have the users to test the comic, and we will have like a huge base of people we can test with. And it's a problem because we know that in the end, what will count is really what's not what the format technically looks like, but the kind of experience we'll give to the people. So the story is key, and UX is really key here. And something I noticed in the process is that you have to implement features one by one, of course, or in batches, but by order of increasing UX complexity, not technical complexity. Most of the problems we have are not technical. The things we do, let's be honest, we're not doing something revolutionary at all. The revolution here is in the standardization, but it's not a revolution. You won't see things you've never seen before. We try to keep things simple, and we have to, because we have to focus on the experience we're giving to the people. And for that, the UI and the UX of the reading engine and the authoring tool is really key. And one last lesson, really linked to the previous one, is that, okay, it's not that we have no idea what we are doing, but it's that we really like feedback at this stage on, does it work? For example, the story in itself is about 90, I think, 90 screens long or 90 pages long, however you want to call it, which is rather on the longer side. Does it work? Or do people stop clicking because they can't do more than 60 clicks in a go and then they get fed up? So we need to have a lot of creations just to test that and to get feedback on what works and what does not. And it also means that you have to make experimenting easy in the tools for your own author, because he may want to, for example, change the duration of all the transitions, and you have to allow for that just to see whether it works better or not. So this is the updated workflow that having this work on a first example allowed us to change. See, it's a paradox, because basically without that new brick in the chain, we were turning in a loop, and now that we have it, we are not turning in a loop anymore, we are moving forward. It's the paradox of this chart, but it's really the way it works. Now we really move forward much faster than before. It really fueled the debates within the BDCOMA working group, like trying to add new concepts, take decisions, see what has to be kept and what has to be left aside and discarded for later. And one good example of that is how to deal with animated transitions. This looks quite simple, okay? The author wants to move from one page to another, and there's an animated transition. In this case, what can you use? You could do it with an animated GIF or a series of images. The problem of the animated GIF is that behind that we're using Canvas, and Canvas doesn't do well with GIFs or APNGs. So maybe just have a list of images, but then a list of images, it will like weigh a lot. And having a 24 frame for just 1 second, for just one transition, it like weighs as much as 24 pages of the whole story. It doesn't really make sense. So maybe we should be using video, but then video, if the resolution is too high, there's problems too. So in the end, the decision we took, but here again, it's still controversial, no decision yet, not clear, like no definite decision yet, is let's have a dedicated effect. These transitions that we had defined at the level of the page, the slide in or the push in transitions, why not have them at the level of the layers? It just adds, oh, just one little level of complexity, we need layers. Which brings us to that. Where are we now in this work? We try to define different levels of conformance for the format. Really still a work in progress, but that's kind of what we're getting at now. So there's basically two kinds of stories. If you look at the production of the past 20 years, all the kinds of digital stories, they fall in two categories: tappable stories, clickable, or scrollable. And we would have a level 0 for this new Divina profile, which deals with overflow, fit, alternate resources for having, for example, multilingual publications. Then a level 1, which could introduce the concept of markers, which could allow for page transitions and guided navigation, taking a whole page, cutting fragments into it and moving from one fragment to the next, and would also allow for the snap points, which are really reminiscent of the CSS snap points, jumping from one part of a page, of an image, to another part of the image. And then we would have a level 2 that would introduce the concept of layers, huge gap in terms of complexity, but that allows for parallax. You can have parallax if you have different layers, and layer entry animations, taking the page transitions we have and moving them to the layer level. So the next steps at the level of the publication, just finished the work, and we have a very clear deadline. It's the September event in Fukuoka, where Laurent wants to produce, to showcase this first Divina that we have created, which also means we need to work faster on the format to specify and document it. The reading engine, working with Afrodita. Thank you for your patience with my stupid questions. We have to be able to publish a first version, same, by September. And the authoring tool, still a lot of work that has to go into it, clean the code, and set up the UI. And like I said, there's so much work on the UI, we really want to try something different with that new generation of UIs. And thank you everyone. Thanks for your attention, and now please feel free to ask us questions.
Thanks for your talk. I was very happy to see that you mentioned durability or sustainability or preservation. But can you say something how you want to achieve that and with whom you have contact to achieve that?
Okay. So the key word behind that is the fact that the format we're using is declarative. So it does not depend on HTML, does not depend on JavaScript. Basically, the format is just one JSON and one folder with resources. So a text file and resources on the side. Meaning it's up to the reading device, the reading engine, to have their own, it's up to the device to have their own reading engine to allow for reading the story. Meaning that you could use the exact same file to, for example, have a story that's clickable on a computer, tappable on a phone, or maybe with a VR headset, you could really, using your gaze, turn pages. It's really up to the device to have their own reading engines. Of course, we're doing the work with Medium 2 to have a basis that's in JavaScript, HTML plus JavaScript, so that the greatest number of devices can already use that. But then you could have native mobile implementations in Swift and Kotlin, for example, and the other languages and frameworks that will pop up.
Yes.
So am I understanding that EPUB could be an output of this format that's agnostic of, you know, what it actually could be? Is that right?
This is a tricky question.
Tricky question because it would because we want to have transitions between what we don't want to call page too much, cuts, effects. EPUB is not done for that. So there would be the addition of lots of JavaScript inside the EPUB. Why not? It could be studied, but well, we don't think that EPUB is the purely optimum way to package that. I think it's doable, yes.
Mm-hmm. It depends on the kind of stories, basically. Some, like, very long webtoon could work. If we consider just one page, it could be an HTML page. But from the moment you have page transitions and in-scroll animations, layers, and you want to have better resource management, because, of course, all those things can be like heavy in resources, then, of course, having JavaScript offers much more flexibility. And so having a format that's agnostic to the language is much better. Yeah.
Hello. First of all, I'm a big fan of visual narrative and sequential media myself. So this is really great news that there is an effort to standardize this. However, I have some concerns about accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
So at this early stage, has the working group been considering things like reducing motion for people who suffer from vestibular diseases, issues around high contrast, making sure the text is accessible in a linear order manner, random access through some sort of table of content, all these things that, because your primary focus is on a declarative format, that lends itself to conveying information that can then be used by reading systems to, based on user preferences, disable some features such as extreme levels of motion. So yeah, I'll stop here. What is the, at which point are you in your thinking about accessibility?
0.0. Let's be clear, we have not taken it into account at this stage. Plus, you also have to consider that some decisions have to be taken at reading engine level, and some decisions are implemented directly in the format. So first, we already have to decide what level of flexibility and freedom we want to give to the reading engine and what we want to really specify in the format. But no, we haven't really talked about accessibility that much.
The only thing we have talked about is adding labels to the image, because we've got a linear order. We've got resources, so we can easily add text. vestibular disorder, transitions, we didn't talk about it. Yes.
Yeah, just want to add, if it's going for the standard in W3C, it has to pass the accessibility horizontal review. So you have to start thinking it, I think, now itself.
Well, it's true, just to answer that, at the moment, I would say it's work that we are doing inside EDRLab before proposing it to the W3C Publishing Working Group. We feel it's too early to propose that for two reasons. One, the Publishing Working Group is focusing on audiobooks, and it's good, and it must be done. Second, this work is interesting mainly for French, Belgian people at the moment, and we don't find a lot of interest from European publishers or others even. So we are talking with our friends from Japan. There is interest. It can be discussed, but European, not too much. So at the moment, we don't feel we've got the worldwide power load that allows us to propose that as is to the W3C working group. So we make our experiments, we prototype, we show, and we'll see that when the audiobook profile is done. Okay, if we've got no more questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.